Hello everybody and welcome to the Daily Splatt for the 15th of January 2018. And today on, as you can see, a very wet summer's day here in Australia, I'm answering another question from a viewer. And it's in relation to a couple of videos that we've already put up. So far in the 2 weeks of the return of the Daily Splatt series, we have discussed the Animaniacs. And we have also discussed Red Dwarf, two television programs which were very big in the 90s and programs which I really enjoyed as a child. The question comes from friend of the show, Ryan Fitzgerald, who's asking what childhood show most influenced or helped shape me as an adult. And I've been thinking about it on and off this morning, and there's a couple of candidates which I think stand out. One of which is Thomas the Tank Engine. Thomas the Tank Engine was like my favourite show as like a kid, as a 3, 4, 5-year-old. I had all the train models, and I had a lot of them, and would play with them in a very particular way. But I really enjoyed the show, and to an extent it may have influenced the way that I speak slightly, because when I moved to this country, I went to high school here in Australia, and when we were graduating, one of our teachers did special awards for everyone in the class, and my award was the Thomas the Tank Engine Award for Oration. Whether or not listening to so much Ringo Starr narrating did influence how I speak, I'm not sure, but Thomas the Tank Engine was a fabulous show. Whether or not it shaped me as an adult beyond the voice, I'm not sure. Certainly, the fact that the original text was written by a reverend, and the tales were all not necessarily about morality tales, but they were tales about why doing something would get you in trouble, and seeing the consequences of actions of, the engines being selfish or impulsive, or even overcoming their particular fears or foibles. Obviously I think a lot of good children's programs do this, so maybe it had an influence in that respect. Another program, although technically it's more of a book thing, but a program that as a child I think definitely had an impact on me at the time, was the Mr. Men. Now, the Mr. Men books were very popular in England in the 1990s. I, again, had them all, read them all, absolutely loved them. And the television show that they had, the animated Mr. Men show, was really good fun. But it had a definite impact on me at the time. What would happen is every day I would pick a different Mr. Man to be that day. I would pretend to be one of the Mr. Men, so I'd be I'm Mr. Tickle, or Mr. Bump, or Mr. Happy, or Mr. Nosy, and I would try and behave like that Mr. Man. Now, anyone who's familiar with the series will know that this presents an interesting challenge to a 4 or 5-year-old, as I was at the time, but also to the parents of said child, because my mum would come and pick me up from the primary school and would then walk me home, normally with my sister in a pram, and this was in the north of England, in the Peak District, so a lot of the time it was quite cold, sometimes raining like this, and occasionally snowing. And on some days it'd be okay. If I came out as Mr. Happy, I'd just be smiling. If I came out as Mr. Rush, I'd be really quick. But there were other Mr. Men who are less helpful in this respect. If I came out as Mr. Tickle, I'd be running around tickling everyone in the playground. Similarly, Mr. Bump, I would bump into every single person or thing that I could, which would slow me down. Obviously, Mr. Slow was very unpopular. But I think the thing that filled my parents with dread was seeing me come out of school wearing my coat back to front, so the back on the front here, walking backwards, because I would be pretending to be Mr. Topsy-Turvy, who did everything the opposite way. So like he'd wear his hat, but instead of wearing it through the hole, he'd just wear it loose upside down. He'd hold his walking stick by the bit that went on the floor, and everything was the wrong way round. And I would walk backwards, like Mr. Topsy Turvy, the whole way home, and could not be coaxed or convinced that it would be beneficial to all of us as a group, but in particular to my lovely parents, that maybe walking forward, walking faster would be good on a November or December school trip home when it's about 3:15 in the afternoon and it's already dark. So, yes, I think the Mr. Men definitely had a big influence at the time. And, you know, maybe that level of playfulness and slipping into different characters and doing that has led to essentially the career I now find myself in, working in entertainment as a professional improviser, as an actor, and just generally working in the arts and slipping between different character poses. So there is a possibility that Mr. Man could hold that crown. I'm sure there's plenty of others. I watched and adored Robot Wars in my later childhood, from like the age of 8 to about the age of 13. Absolutely could not get enough of Robot Wars. You know, the Animaniacs, as we've discussed, very popular. Red Dwarf, although strictly speaking not a children's show, was very popular with me at the time. Rosie and Jim, which was about two ragdolls on a houseboat, was a show that I really enjoyed. Although I'm not sure how much of an influence that had. Brum, about the car, was always good fun. I always enjoyed the Looney Tunes. They were good fun. Tom and Jerry. I recently rewatched some Tom and Jerry from the 1950s and had an absolute blast. But yeah, basically there was a lot of different programs. Oh, Dexter's Lab. Dexter's Laboratory was another one which, again, maybe didn't influence me, but was certainly one that I remember watching. Or maybe it did. I mean, I always had an interest in the sciences, and it was fun seeing a cartoon character like Dexter who had his own secret laboratory and doing those sorts of experiments. I remember always wishing that I had a lab like that at certain points. But I'm probably going to say the Mr. Men. I'm just going to say that was probably the one that had the biggest influence. So I hope that answers your question, Ryan, and I hope all of you enjoyed this video today and have managed to stay nice and dry if you're in the same part of the world as me. That's all, though. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you tomorrow. So until then, bye!